Hello and welcome back to Brick Gaming JUSH. Today I'm going to take you through just some basic combos and just some basic things that you can do with the 60 card Odion deck that I got third place at regionals with. Due to some interest in the deck and due to interest in people wanting to learn more about it, I will do my best to go through and just talk about some brief strategy guides and just kind of how the deck works. So first off, you always have the basic Odion combo. There is nothing too crazy here, so let's say you start with Man with the Mark, or not Man with the Mark. I think we can just start with Anubis. So that's generally what happens. Or sometimes you open all three, so I'm just going to grab all of the cards and then just run through this. So like, let's say you start with like Anubis or Man with the Mark or whatever it happens to be. So you can go Anubis, Man, grab the field spell, use the field spell. The field spell goes ahead and sets Apophis. Now, of course, you're going to have like at least one other spell trapped in your hand. It's very unlikely that you don't. So it can be whatever. We can just say it's all hero or anything else besides that. You can get your search with treasures. So off of treasures, you're going to go ahead and grab your Serket, which I am finding right now. Go ahead, grab Serket. Serket does his thing. You banish from deck. Usually you're going to banish Nibiru. Usually Nibiru is the best choice, but you can also banish out Lord, depending on what your hand looks like and depending on the matchup. So I would say either Nibiru or Lord is always the correct choice. So one of these two is going to get banished. I would not banish one of your Eldritch monsters or banish another Anubis, because you want your Anubises in grave because it allows for insane follow-up. And if you get like 2 or more in grave, you're just winning. Obviously, this isn't anything new so far. This combo has been talked about a ton, so I'm just going to run through it. So off of your Serket, you're going to grab this. You're going to use Apophis, since you can use it now because at Temple, you summon him out. Then you go ahead and you grab the other one, summon the other one out, use those two. Well, and this is where you have decision trees, actually. I'm going to go into some decision trees. So, the first decision tree that you can go with is you can make Cross Sheep. If your opponent doesn't have a hand, or if you don't think they're going to nib you based upon their deck or anything like that, you can go Cross Sheep first, go into this guy, get rid of these two, which I'm struggling to do. So these are in your grave now. Then you go ahead, you make your big old fusion. Usually you'll summon it over here, usually summon it to wherever the furthest point is. Then you're going to use Cross Sheep and bring back the Man with the Mark. And the reason you do this is obviously this guy has really low attack, and it's better to summon him in defense because, well, he's protected. And if he doesn't attack, that way you're not going to take damage from your opponent attacking in. Now, you have another decision tree here. Now, of course, you're going to use his effect. But depending on what your hand looks like and depending on what you can do... Oh, this is out of the camera view. Let me fix that real fast. Your next decision tree is you can use these, and you can go up into Seal Hat. Or if you're worried about destruction, you can leave him on the board. And you can basically, if you have another monster, just go into Seal Hat. Or if you're going second, go into SP. Or even just go into... Yeah, you're usually just going to SP or Seal Hat. You don't usually make these guys as much. And that's just like super basic, super easy to do. Not too much more of an explanation there. Now you have negates, you have follow-up, you have everything you need. Super basic. Now, the biggest issue with this deck is sometimes you open really good hands and you're just going to fill up all of your zones. So you're just going to have to, in certain cases, just wink off some of the guys that you might want to leave on board, like Man with the Mark, to get more zones for more powerful negates. Now, as for the rest of this is super basic. Anything with Imseti, all you're doing with that is you're just going into number 90. You're never going into anything else. Unless you're going to go for a game, you always go into number 90 if you're not going to go for a game. This gives protection so you can do your full extended combos and then have a negate set up. Of course, you're going to also use Happy, but this should be pretty clear. So you're always just wanting to set him up with a negate, especially going first because it prevents your opponent from hand trapping you. And if they don't hand trap this, then your plays basically become free unless they have 2 or more hand traps or if they have like an Imperm or something. This deck can also play around like Imperm super easily just because of redundancy. And if you open Man with the Mark plus your field spell, you're just always beating Imperm every single time. This is just a free way to beat Imperm. Next up is for the Cash Zero. You never do anything special with these. Basically, you always want to see Unicorn. You don't want to see Fenrir unless you're going second. or unless you open both. If you open both, that's great. If you're going second, this is great. Going first, it can also be good, but this is generally what we want to see going first. Unicorn really just set extra deck rip, and depending on the matchup, this card can just win games by itself just by ripping the right card. So if you rip the right card, that's awesome, and sometimes you can get 2 rips off of this one guy from the extra deck. And then all you're ever grabbing off of this guy is just Birth, which I will get to. And so basically this guy just becomes a free body after you use the effect, and after you set up enough of your board where either you've ripped your opponent's extra deck or they don't have a hand trap by that point, then you wink it off for whatever you need, and you're just going to bring it back with Birth, and you can just leave it up on the field most of the time unless you need the zones. But if you don't need the zones, you just leave this up and you're going to probably get another extra deck rip or get at least 1 off of this guy almost every single time. So Kashtira stuff, super basic. Horror stuff, super basic. You're not doing anything fancy with those. Also with this, super basic, you're never doing anything fancy. And just by themselves. The Eldritch, same thing. For the Eldritch, it's really simple. Unless you open the traps for them, the only way you're ever going to really use Golden Lord is either A, going second to out something, which can be really good sometimes, or B, you're using it off of Delta. So the whole Delta line is also super simple. Now this is going to be a 1 plus any monster combo. So it doesn't matter if it's Man with the Mark, a Kashtira, whatever. So you're going to activate Delta, set in Golden Lord. You're going to use Golden Lord in Grave to summon it back. This will go Grave, but then will go to your hand. So this is back in hand, so now you have another card in hand that you can work with in the future. That can also be a good discard or anything like that. Now you have Golden Lord on the field. You're going to wink it off because you don't need him on the field. He's not important. And then you're going to go into your Fallen. Now you got Fallen up on the field. Now all that you need is another way to get to a body. Let's say Man with the Mark. You go through that whole line. And eventually you're going to link off. Usually, let me find it real fast. You're going to usually link off Circuit, this guy, plus this guy, or anything that isn't important. You're going to get rid of these guys to Grave. Summon out whatever your link is. But then you're going to chain block. So you're going to go chain link 1, chain link 2 usually, unless it's like Cross Sheep or something. But you're going to chain block on him. And this guy, 90% of the time, you're just going to summon out Mad Golden Lord. Going second, this card's insane. It clears games super easily. And going first, it's fine to either lead this up on the board as just a big body, or if you can get away to Anubis, you can use Anubis plus this guy to make pretty much whatever. And I believe this guy's also 10 stars, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, 10. And usually off of that, you're just going to make Verudris. And Verudris is absolutely busted. All of the pops it does, the negate, all of that type of stuff, it comes up so much where this guy just outs stuff. This is just your big outer. So that's like a lot of just like the individual engine combos. And you're always going to want to mix one engine with another if possible. You're just going to be something like the Eldritch package plus like Man with the Mark, or it's going to be the Kashtira plus like Odion. Usually it's best when you have 2 or more packages going in your opening hand, which is not very hard to get to because this deck is mostly engine. So that's basically all of the linear combos. Now I'm going to talk about some of the non-linear stuff. And all the non-linear stuff really comes out of either having Thrust, that grass, or when you have like 3 or more engines. So let's say like you have your this, and this as engines to work with in your opening hand, for example. This allows for a little bit more non-linear, more board building. You're not doing anything super fancy. All that you're going to be able to do is just extend from Cross Sheep into Silhouette. And then sometimes you'll be able to put up, depending on how your hand goes, for example, Verudris or something like that, off of these cards. So it just depends on how it's sequenced and what the rest of your hand looks like. Especially for a non-linear combo, it's going to be like multiple cards that you're going to usually need. Unless you open Grass. Or you open Thrust and you get to Grass. So the whole Grass, all that matters off of Grass is one thing. And it's pretty, or I shouldn't say one thing, but one thing is very important off of Grass. And that's getting at least 1 Anubis engraved. Now, optimally, the optimal answer is to have either 2 Anubises engraved, or get to a way that you have Anubis plus Golden Lord on the first turn. Now, if you Grass and you mill 2 Anubises, and of course you're going to mill traps. The thing about this deck is that we play a lot of traps. So you get traps in your graveyard, boom. This guy is not once per turn summoned, so you can summon him back. You can link up into anything. Especially going second, if you're able to keep linking him off and eventually get into XYZ or just have 2 bodies of him plus all of your link guys, you're going to go for a game 9 out of 10 times. 9 out of 10 times, your opponent just can't do anything about that. Even if they called by this guy, it's non-activated effect. So they can call by one of these guys is gone, but then you have the other one to keep linking off of. And it's even better going second, because most of the time this guy's going to be your largest body, so you can go up into Typhon, or if you have a combination of these two, you can go up into Varudris. And also Eldritch, if they call by grave this, it's fine. It doesn't matter. If they negate this guy in grave, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Like the Eldritch stuff, all that matters is just getting the traps off. This is what matters, having the traps up. So if they keep hitting this guy, oh, perfect. Because then they're not going to be hitting your Scarlet Sanguine. They're not going to be hitting like Hakiro. They're not going to be hitting like your Conquistador. Or this thing. The Glorious dude. They're not going to be hitting that. So, and basically in summary, because that was a little bit of a tangent, you need, in the best case scenario, you have a combination of this, or more. And since you're always moving traps, this guy's going to at least summon back once. I think the most amount of times I summoned this guy back in one turn was probably 5 times. It was around 5 times I was able to summon this guy back. And I think you can get even more in certain cases just due to the number of traps. And you can definitely get traps back into your graveyard again, depending on your opening hand. So this just allows for linking or XYZing into pretty much anything very easily. So that's like your graveyard. So non-linear aspect comes from that, what you mill. Also, milling your traps for this is fine. This is perfectly fine if you mill any of these. It doesn't matter what you mill, because you're always going to get back into deck off of Anubis. So all of your traps can go grave. You could theoretically have Tikaboo, Skill Drain, Imperm. This guy basically activate or be recurred infinite number of times. Like in this deck, you're never decking out. You just don't deck out in this deck. Now, you can get into situations where you get low on card count, but you're not going to lose by deck count unless you're playing against like Runic, and then you just side correctly for that. The other non-linear part is sometimes Super Poly. Sometimes you go second and you see Super Poly. Now, due to the number of attributes and different types we play, because we play lights, we play earths, there are winds in this deck, and then once again, like darks. I'm trying to think, are there any other attributes I miss? Probably not. No, I didn't miss any other attributes unless you get into the extra deck. Are there any different ones in here? Oh, water, but that's like your Super Poly target anyways. So yeah, you have all of this to work with. Basically, all these different attributes, types, stuff like that. And yeah, Super Poly is almost always live into every single matchup. So this allows for you to either Super Poly your own field and go for game a lot of the time, or Super Poly your opponent's field and get their bodies off the field, depending on the matchup and stuff. So this card is very versatile into pretty much everything. There's nothing that's really not that versatile into, just because of all the different types of cards you run. And you can also make Rura super easily in this deck off of like your Golden Lord stuff. And sometimes that's just good, just to even get them into the graveyard if you're not going for game, depending on how things are going. So, let's see what else is important for this deck. I guess that's really the main stuff. Again, the non-linear stuff really just comes from your mills. And a lot of the combos and a lot of the things you're doing, it's going to be linear every single time. And the reason it works is because your opponent's usually only able to hit one of the linear pathways, but they're not usually able to hit both. They're usually only able to hit one. So if they only hit one, you're going to be totally fine. If they hit two, it's a little bit rougher, but I've recovered from that at tournament, and I was able to keep going most of the time. Okay, now as for matchups, I talked about how this deck, and I think really trap decks in general right now are really good into this format. And so for matchups, this deck absolutely cooks. I don't want to say this 100% of the time because nothing's ever 100% guaranteed. But let's say, for example, you go into the Vanquish Soul matchup. Now, I'm still not 100% familiar with the Vanquish Soul or Vanquish Soul K9. But based upon everything I've read and everything I've seen, it mainly hits monsters. And now, especially post-side, this deck can play around that super easily with like evenly matched. Theoretically, Raigeki can do some work. Lightning Storm can do some work against that deck. So any of that type of stuff, anything that's not monster-based against that deck feels pretty good right now. Then Dragon Tail, anything that isn't monster and that isn't spell-based is pretty good, because they do have a spell negate in the deck with their trap. But if you can out that one spell negate that they usually only play one of, I believe, you can just keep going after that. So you just bait out the first one with something, and then you just keep going. So this deck, into matchups like that, it just feels really, really good. So Dragon Tail, yes, it does have a extra deck monster that pops, and they do have removal in their deck, but it's pretty easy to get around that removal off of the right hand. And once you get rid of a lot of their stuff once, you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the turn. So at most, they're really going to struggle just to out your back row most of the time, which is mainly a back row deck outside of just getting a few bodies on field. And if your bodies get negated but they stay on field, it's perfectly fine. Plus, there's so many extenders in this deck that you can just always extend further in most cases. Then against Yummy, really the only thing you have to worry about into that matchup is the field spell. Outside of that, this deck doesn't really struggle against anything else in that deck. Like, when I was playing against it, I realized that if they don't have access to their field spell, they start to really struggle against this deck. And you can get rid of both field spells, which isn't too hard. Like, you can banish it, pop it, and sure, the pop allows it to come back, but there's plenty of ways just to deal with their field spell. And that's really the biggest issue. And this deck also has a really good time and really good matchup into time against that deck, just because this deck doesn't pay life points, and the huge bodies can at times be difficult, especially if you get rid of the field spell. As for like previous format stuff, yes, I feel like Malice would still be pretty good against this deck, but I didn't see very much Malice representation, because the other decks, I believe from what I've seen, generally can outpace or even beat Malice. Against Ryzeal, this deck feels really good against Ryzeal. You just have tons of answers for all of their stuff, especially post-side. Post-side, it feels really nice. So yeah, this deck really doesn't struggle against anything that's super monster-based. I feel like that can be said for a lot of other trap decks. Like, I was thinking about, like, potentially Paleozoic could maybe do something, not competitively as much, but maybe on a rogue level. I could see Paleozoic doing something. Eldritch feels pretty good in this format. I think maybe Eldritch Sun could be playable, depending on how the format shapes out. Odion felt really good throughout the entire tournament. Just the Odion package itself, like this card just single-handedly wins games, especially if you can get to 2 of these. A lot of decks struggle with just play through even 2 of these. And also, since it plays around tactics, thrust, all that type of stuff, and this deck can play past that super easily, this also just feels really good. The biggest problem for this deck, I think, is honestly Nibiru, but I do not see very many people playing Nibiru, just because I know that Vanquish Soul can play around it pretty easily, and other decks can also play around Nibiru. So, yeah, really, like, the cards that would hit this deck the worst generally aren't being played as of yet in the new format. So, because of that, this deck just has really optimal matchups. And maybe it was just the event I played at, because I didn't see a single evenly matched. Evenly matched is the only card I worried about all day long, evenly in Nibiru. And those 2 cards, yeah, they blow this deck out. Yeah, unless you side deck, or unless you do, like, a shorter combo. But I started out the day just doing only the short combos for this deck, ending on like 4 or 5 summons with the possibility if I get Nib to do more. So, and yeah, it was just able to play through that. And yes, you can play through Nib with the optimal hand. If you open optimally, you can get around Nib super easily. But you're not always going to open optimally, especially with 60 cards. So you have to always keep that in consideration. The only times I would play into Nib, like, if I knew my opponent didn't have it, or if I could set up one of these guys, where it's like, yeah, I can set up one of these guys early, and then it's fine. Yeah, I'm trying to think about anything else that's super important to go for this deck. I mean, honestly, this deck is surprisingly really basic, with all of the linear combos being super easy, and there's no new unexplored territory with any of that. And the only unexplored territory is with, like, the more non-linear stuff, and that's just really dependent off of grass and how you sequence your plays. And sequencing is incredibly important in this deck. You have to sequence. So usually, what I do sequence-wise, I'll just get into this super fast, is I'll just grab each different engine just as a representation. I Oh yeah, I need the horse stuff. So, so based off of this, there's always a specific order to how you do things. Number one, you're always going to do your Kashtira stuff first. Kashtira always comes first. This is always what you're doing. Number two is this. If you don't see the cash stuff, then you're doing this first. And if you do see the cash stuff, you're doing this second. Number three is going to be usually the Eldritch stuff. Eldritch comes third, and this is, you always do these first if you have them. And then finally, the Odion stuff. This is the final piece, and this is the final thing you're doing. And the reason you do this in this order, because it is a little bit important for how you sequence this. And also, in some cases, you're not going to sequence it like this, but it just depends, of course. But I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, this is the sequence. So you do this first, because number one, this is bait. If you decide to do this effective search right away. If you don't do this effective search right away, then all that you're doing is just setting this up so you can banish from your opponent's extra deck if they interact with any of this other stuff. And you're never searching right away with this either, unless your hand sucks. If your hand sucks, then sure, but unless your hand sucks, you're not using the search effect until you resolve something else. Number two, you're doing this next because this is a good bait. This baits tons of hand traps. It baits the Ash, it baits the Dominus, anything like that. This is your bait right here. This baits everything. This does not matter in the deck. It doesn't matter if this resolves. Who cares? It's a small package, and it rarely comes up. So if this gets hit, that's fine. Who cares? Number three, Eldritch. Now, you're doing this next because now your plays are either protected or you have a way to defend, like a way to protect yourself from certain interactions if your opponent doesn't want to get their extra deck banished. But by this point, you have protection and you have a way to interact with your opponent. Now, you're doing this next because you're going to send it and you're going to be able to start comboing just off of this by itself. And you can then at that point use Unicorn because now you're protected. So now you can link off Unicorn, link off Diffusion, start doing that type of stuff. And then finally is the Odion part. Now, you're doing this last every single time because this is the most important part of the deck. This is the one that you want to resolve. You want all of your Odion cards to resolve 100% of the time. If your opponent hits them, it can really suck sometimes. It can just straight up suck. So you want all of this stuff to go first, and then you want this to come in at the end and just finish building your board. And the same thing goes. Like, let's say you see this, you're going to do it 1, 2, 3. If you see only this, you're going to do it 1, 2, 3. If you only see these two, you're going to do this first and then this. So you're always going to sequence it in that order. That's the sequence. And while the Eldritch stuff isn't super important for it to resolve, if it does resolve, you're looking at so much advantage just off of that small package that it's insane. This can just do so much just by itself or in combination with these. So, anyways, that's just some basic strategy, basic combos, basic things to know about this deck. I didn't really talk about side decking. It should be fairly obvious with this deck. Now, if anyone wants more information on how to side with it, just feel free to let me know. This video is already really long, and it should not be this long, so I'm going to end it here. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.